Welcome to Coastal Conversation, episode 13. Thank you for listening today. Remember, Colossians 4:6 says, "Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." Our goal today is that we will do just that. Well, you are going to love today's special guest. This episode, I have with me our Coastal Church Business Administrator, Kerry Miller. Now, not only is she a detailed, faithful, integris business administrator for us here at Coastal Church, she is a godly woman who desires to honor God through her life and her finances. You are going to be challenged today, but I promise you, stick with us in a good way. You are going to be challenged. I think that it's important for you to hear what Kerry has to teach us about this topic because she has done so well with it in her own life. I promise you, if you listen, you're going to be better for it. So let's get ready to lean in, maybe take a few notes, and learn about godly finances. Welcome with me today to Coastal Conversation, my friend, Kerry Miller.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Well, thank you, Kerry, for being with us today. I know this is a little different. You're usually on our behind the scenes type gal here at Coastal Church.
100%.
And you prefer that.
Yep.
And I don't really think people understand how much you do because they never see your face. Or many people this might be the first time they know that you're even on staff here with us.
Yes, most people don't know that I'm on staff unless I wear my name tag at Discover Coastal. I kind of come in on Sundays and I sneak right out.
Yeah.
Because I'm here
All day, every day.
Yeah, during the work week making things happen.
All the things. How many years have you been at Coastal Church?
Well, I'm one of the original
You are.
OG members. So 14 years in attendance as a member, and then on staff here, it'll be 10 years in January.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
That's so good. You've been through a lot with us.
Yeah.
And you started out in, kids church, helping Colleen stay organized in Coastal Kids. And then we kind of saw giftings in you because you were a paralegal before.
Yes, and God delivered me out of that.
Out of paralegals and then into business administrating for Coastal Church. And it's just been a wonderful journey, and you're so good at it because if people don't know about you, you're a 1 on the Enneagram. And if you don't know what the Enneagram is, we could do a whole podcast. One day we're going to do a podcast on the Enneagram because it's my favorite personality profile. But the Enneagram, you're a 1, which means you are a very much a perfectionist, a detail-oriented person, an A-type personality at an extreme. So all your ducks are always in order.
And there's a spreadsheet for everything.
And there's an Excel spreadsheet for everything.
Yeah.
Which I still don't know how to do all the Excel, but you help us.
Sure.
That's what you're here for. So anyway, you do a lot for us at Coastal Church behind the scenes. Keeps Pastor Chad and Pastor Tim like to say, you keep us out of jail and make sure we do everything right and by the book, which we need people like you. So we have a lot of ground to cover. I want to jump right in today because I asked you to come on and talk about godly finances. And then you mentioned something to me that I really never, I knew about it and thought about it, but I didn't think about it in this way. You said, I really think we need to talk about personal finances first before we dive into the topic of godly finances. Why do you think that was important?
Well, I think that your personal finances, the way that you steward your personal finances is godly, can be godly. And so I didn't want to come in here and talk about tithing and not give people the tools to be able to do that properly.
Right.
And so I really thought that we needed to get down to the basics and talk about saving and talk about spending before we ever got to giving, because we need to find where that money's going to come from.
Right. Yeah, because so many of us do not know. So for us to know what our money is doing and where our money is, you say we need a budget, all right? And for that word alone strikes fear and dismay and all the emotions in a lot of people. They're like, ooh. I know when Pastor Chad and I got married and he wrote out our budget. And he showed me when you're going to talk about this in a minute, what my allowance was, and not that he was giving me money. We both worked, but out of our income, what my allowance or what our allowance would be. I was like, okay, wait, hold on. Is this for a week? oh no, this is the month. Oh no, we're going to need to do.
I need a raise.
And, in marriage, that's a whole nother topic we could talk about. That's a big trust factor that you have to learn about, growing together in your finances. But you need a budget. We all have to start with a budget. We have to know where our money is going. So where should one start if they've never developed a budget? And this is something, and I want to stop right here. Helping people develop a budget is something you do really well. And it wasn't always like a natural, it's kind of natural for you to have your things in order, but budgeting and stuff is not something that was just innate in you. You had to learn, right?
Absolutely. Well, and I think it was probably 9 years ago, I went through one of our first financial peace classes, and I got turned on to the EveryDollar app, and we created our own budget. And so that's one of the budgeting apps that I recommend. I still use it. I use the free version. They do have a paid for version that will download your banking transactions. I go in and I manually enter all of mine.
Yeah.
But I think absolutely you need a budget. You need to lay eyes on what you're spending. When we started budgeting, I was shocked, horrified that we were spending $1,200 a month on eating out.
Wow.
That's not even groceries. That's just...
And there was only 3 of y'all.
There's only 3 of my tiny family. But, and just to kind of rein that in and put some parameters on what you're doing.
I think that's so good because that you just said that and used yourself as an example, because this doesn't, when we have you on here, you haven't always been perfect in this. This has been a learning curve for you. And so you're just teaching us what you've learned.
Absolutely. And
right?
There's still some months that we get it wrong. There's still some months that we blow it. Mm-hmm. But because we've, created some margin in our lives, we've got this money in savings that, we can bring over, to help cover the rest of the month that we, overspent in a category.
Yeah. So we need a budget. So you mentioned getting a budget. You mentioned Financial Peace University, which we've offered here several times at Coastal Church. Mm-hmm. Anybody can go online to Dave Ramsey's website and take that at any time. We've just offered it here in group classes before. And they have an app called the EveryDollar app. We're going to put that information in our show notes. Mm-hmm. So you say there's a paid for version that you can pay like a monthly subscription.
Right.
But there's also a free version of the EveryDollar app.
Yep. And you just have to plug in your information. So every morning I'm sitting down and I'm putting in every transaction that came through.
Okay. So you make that a rhythm.
It's a rhythm in my life. And it kind of just has to be. If you
ground you.
Dave Ramsey says, if you want to live like no one else, you have to live like no one else. Mm-hmm. So
you have to create those rhythms.
Yep.
And then there's another app that you mentioned to me before this. What's another app that you recommend?
It's called YNAB. It's the acronym for You Need a Budget. So YNAB.
Okay.
Very highly recommended. It also plugs into your banking information and imports all your transactions for you.
Is that one free or is
that one's not free, but there is a free trial subscription, and they give you some odd days. Like I think it's like a 33-day trial because they really feel like you need a little bit more than a month to really know that it's working for you.
And this is something that takes a minute to develop. So developing a budget is not just it's not quick. So when you sit down to develop a budget with somebody, I know when we've hired a lot of younger staff that have come on at Coastal Church recently, and this is the first big girl, big boy job they've ever had, real money coming in, and they've never really been taught how to, now how do I budget rent money, insurance money, all the things. And we kind of send them to Kerry as our one-stop shop because you do good at it. Mm-hmm. And so when you sit down with somebody to develop a budget, what are some of the things that you do or you recommend?
Well, I'm gonna look at the last 2 or 3 months of bank statements, and I'm gonna put them into categories for you. Based on you spend this on housing, you spend this on groceries, you spend this on eating out. We're gonna allot some amount for personal items, and then you're gonna kind of take off with that, and then at the end of the month, we're going to circle back and see how you did. We're going to launch the next budget, maybe make some tweaks. But I think our young people, they've never they've never been taught financial literacy. They're not getting taught that in school.
Right.
You know, so they really need somebody to come in their lives and teach them how to do it. And we've made enough financial mistakes in our lives that we can teach how to do it.
Let me tell you what not to do.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So you, when you set these budgets out, you do broad categories.
Yes.
So you have save, spend, and give categories. Let's break those down a little bit for everybody listening. So in the save category, give us some tips and some advice on what you do to save and some things that you found that worked for you and the people that you put on budgets.
Saving is one of the things that gets me most excited.
Okay. I've never heard anybody say that, but okay, Kerry.
Well,
Here we go.
Okay.
No, I'm just teasing.
No. Okay. For starters, if you are still using the traditional brick and mortar bank down the road, your
Oh.
Wells Fargo, your Regions Bank, and your savings account is earning
Nothing.
then it's time to switch to a high yield savings account. And you'll do that by opening up an account on an online bank.
Online bank. So this
And-
is not a brick and mortar.
It's not a brick and mortar, but don't be scared. It's FDIC insured.
Yeah.
Your money is safe,
Okay.
but the interest rate is 4 or 5% there.
On your savings, high yield
Savings account. Yes. So I personally use Ally,
Okay.
ALLY.
And we're going to put that in the show notes.
Thank you. And what I love most about Ally is that they have savings buckets. So I have a savings bucket for my emergency fund. I have a savings bucket for our vacations. I have a savings bucket for our daughter's wedding, you know, and our money's working for us there, you know, so.
And you're accruing interest and being able to move it around when you need to. Have you ever had any problems withdrawing money from Ally or anything like that?
No, I've never had a problem. It does normally take 2 days to get your money back. You know, it links back to my regular checking account. So it might take 2 days to transfer. So I still have a little bit of money in a traditional savings account, but not much.
Okay. So that's something we could do tomorrow.
You can do it right now.
Like, you don't even have a budget to do that.
No, and you don't even have to go into a bank. You just download the app.
You don't have to talk to anybody. You can just transfer money all you want.
And we have railed it into our daughter and her fiance so much that the moment that they book their honeymoon, they open a high yield savings account to start saving for their honeymoon.
Wow.
So
That's really cool.
yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about saving for retirement. What are some advice you can give people that maybe have not started or maybe have, but haven't done it well?
Well, I think the first thing that you need to do is take advantage of any company match that you get. So a lot of companies, they'll match up to 6%. And then once you meet that company match, then start investing in a Roth IRA, and you can invest up to $7,000 a year in your Roth IRA. Your income into your 401k is not taxed at the front end, so it's going to be taxed on the back end. So your Roth IRA is reversed. It's taxed already, and so you're not going to be taxed in retirement. So it's just going to give you a good balance in your retirement age. It's also important that we start saving for retirement because it was kind of alarming last month. The news said that in 10 years, Social Security is going to get cut by 20%.
Wow.
So we cannot rely on the government to take care of us.
No.
So take care of yourself first.
Nor do I think that's biblical.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. You should be living within your means now so that you can live within your means later.
Right.
You know? Yeah, that's an alarming statistic. So we also have wants and desires that we don't need to be putting on credit cards, that you say, because credit cards are charging astronomical interest rates.
Absolutely. So getting into the spend category, we don't want you to be charging anything that you want. We want you to be saving for what you want.
Okay.
God wants you to have all the desires of your heart. He wants to bless you, and he will add no sorrow to it. And that 22% interest rate is a lot of sorrow.
It's a lot of sorrow.
So take your time, save for it, evaluate your wants and desires. You're going to love that vacation all the more because you worked for it.
So talk about, you've saved this money, and you're intentional about that. A lot of this, Kerry, we can't cover in a 30-minute episode. It takes education. It takes taking time to listen to podcasts, reading books on personal finance and finances, learning how to do it well and do it right. And I think that's what you've done, is you've put in the work to do that right. And a lot of us on staff have. But those that, we're not trying to bring shame to those who haven't yet. We're saying this just started for you 8 and 9 years ago, that you've, discovered all these things and began to put yourselves on budgets and work the process. And since then, you're majority debt free, I believe, without a lot of debt, maybe your house.
Well, and everything that we have is very low interest rate debt. I'm not 100% subscribed to the Dave Ramsey method. I do think that there's no good debt, but I do think if you can have a 2.9% interest rate, and if that makes sense for you and your family, go for it. But I do think that we can buy ourselves, out of comfort, by stacking up all those debts.
Yeah, that's good. So we're under spending. So we've saved, we're researching where to save, how to save. We're getting high yield savings accounts, which is easy to do. We're saving for the right things. We're saving for a rainy day. We have our emergency fund in there, which that's a Dave Ramsey thing. If you don't know about that, you need to really get into that. I remember talking about saving, Chad has always subscribed to Dave Ramsey, so we've always done that and had envelopes. And he's a big cash on hand guy. So we have, don't break in our house, but we have safes and, envelopes and, envelopes everywhere. But envelopes of cash and things like that, saving for different things. And we have savings accounts and all that. But when we first got married, I was like, where is all this money going? I didn't understand, because my parents never put me on. I mean, parents don't really put their kids on a budget at that, that age. But so I was like, I don't understand where all this money's going. And then right before Christmas, he brings out this wad of money. And we're like little youth pastors making piddly beans, $18,000, $20,000 a year. So where did you get all that money? And he said, it's called savings, and he's like, now you can go buy Christmas, because I've been saving all year
for you to spend
it. And we don't have to go in debt every Christmas, because he's a very good financer. And so we budget for these things. But that was kind of my first aha moment. Oh, this really works. And he's not crazy, right? And he actually knows what he's doing in this area. And so we get through the savings thing, and we've learned a lot about that. And then we get to spend, but we don't just get to spend, without restraint. Talk about spending a little bit, and how do you budget some of that spending money? So now that you know what you're going to save, then how do we spend what we have?
Well, just like you and Chad, Brett and I also get an allowance. We've just given each other an allowance, ever since, our first financial peace class. And, I think they call it something else, but we jokingly called it allowance. Because,
we do too.
But honestly, what happens is I might get to the end of the month and I've gone through my allowance. A friend's going to say, hey, Kerry, do you want to go out to lunch? And I'm going to have to tell her no, because it's just not within the budget. So some of spending is also not spending.
Wow.
But I also think that your friends will thank you for it if you say, hey, it's just not within our budget right now. I think that they're looking for somebody to have those same conversations with, and maybe they're trying to pull back the reins and they need an accountability partner.
That's good.
Go ahead and have those conversations with your friends about what you can and can't do.
Yeah, and you had mentioned before that Dave Ramsey says you have to live like no one else to live like no one else. And that means prioritizing your expenditures.
Absolutely.
So he breaks it down really, really lean. He gets you get to live indoors, your utilities, and that's about all he gives you. But
right. But I'm going to give you a little bit of money for clothing. I think your clothing budget should be about 5% of your income.
Yeah.
Your housing should be about 30% of your income. We then also have a line item in our budget for miscellaneous. So it's items that we don't necessarily count on, but you can always count on not counting on something, to come through. So we just want to build in a little bit of margin every month into our budget at this point.
Now, if somebody's in debt, like credit card debt, high interest rate credit card debt, do you have any tips for them to like spend out of that, like get out of that debt faster? Is there a way? Because then your spending is going to look different if you're in debt, right?
Absolutely. Well, one, don't touch the credit cards.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. You're done.
If you can't pay your credit card off in time, in full every month, then you don't need them. I believe in credit cards. I think that they're a valuable tool. I love to use them to travel hack and use them for points, but I pay it off every month. I haven't yet, paid in many, many years. I haven't paid any interest on my credit cards. So if you're racked with credit card debt, first we're going to pay off the minimum. And you can either do one of two methods. You have the snowball method where you're paying on the smallest balance first, and then you're going to transfer once that's paid off, you're then going to transfer what you're paying on that one to the next one, and that snowball gets bigger, bigger, bigger. Or you can do the avalanche method, which is paying on the highest interest rate debt first. So that's going to be your credit cards. So if you have extra money at the end of your month, throw that on a credit card.
Yeah.
And shrink that credit card debt.
As fast as you can.
As fast as you can, and then get to the next one.
So we're going to cut out some expenditures that aren't necessary so that we can get that done and out of the way. And again, Financial Peace would help you do that, or other budgeting books and tips would
Absolutely.
help you
And
do
take
that.
a look at the subscriptions that you have. You would be surprised at the things that maybe you don't need, or you at least don't need for a season. If you're getting NSF charges on your account, we need to take something away.
Yeah. There needs to be hard conversations.
Absolutely.
Which brings me to a good question. So you had mentioned that you and Brett sit down once a month and you have a financial meeting.
Yes.
For lack of a better term, in your marriage. Tell me about that. What does that look like? What do you do? And did you bring, when Ashley was still living at home, did you bring her into that conversation?
So once a month we sit down and we talk. Typically it's towards the end of the month. So kind of when I know how we're looking to land at the end of the month, if we're going to have any extra money. So we talk about where our money went. If we have any extra money, where that money is going to go to. Do we want to pay extra on something? Do we want to put that money towards savings? And then we talk about what the next month is going to look like. And Brett, for a good amount of time, could have just said, I trust you.
Yeah.
Because
you're more of the administrator type.
I'm the administrator. And so he's like, you know what you're doing. But I needed him to have buy-in. I didn't want to just be telling him, well, this is how we're spending our money.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I really needed to bring him into the conversation. That way we have joint goals. Like we're both working towards this savings goal, and he doesn't feel like I'm depriving him, when I only give him this measly allowance,
Yeah.
because he then he has a savings bucket for his motorcycle.
Yeah. So he's wanting a motorcycle soon.
Well, he waffles back and forth.
Okay.
And so it's, but he has a very long runway,
Yeah.
We talked about how he could potentially buy for it now. And one of the conversations that we had was immediately satisfying that need for the motorcycle, that want for the motorcycle, or do we prolong it and we save for that motorcycle?
Yeah.
And along the way, he's gone back and forth of, do I really want this? Do I not? So it's also given us some time to really evaluate and not rush into a hasty decision too. But yes, and we bring our daughter into the conversation.
Okay.
The conversation normally happens around the dinner table, and she's right there. I also have a bill book, and I've had a bill book ever since our first year of marriage, where I put all of our bills in there, and you could come into my house and it's sitting right there, and it keeps me organized, and she's not shielded from where we are financially.
Yeah.
And
because you've had those open conversations and Yeah.
Yeah. And, and we're trying to set her and her future spouse up for success financially. We don't want them to think that money's monopoly money, just because you swipe it, that there's no accountability for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because many young adults are very, like you just said, financially illiterate. And I think it's important for parents to kind of help them, even if we're, and again, I want to say this is no shame. This podcast is not about shaming you if you don't do it right now. I'm trying to give you tools to help you do godly finances God's way.
Right.
And the way we get there is to, like you said, to know what we have, to be open and honest about where our money is going. Many of us, like one time I saw this, I'm like, we subscribed to that? I didn't know we had like this Netflix subscription or this Hulu subscription or, and those things add up, but I think it's so wise that you sit down every month and just, okay, where did our money go this month? Let's look at all the all the things. Let's be very specific. And then where do we want to go next time? Chad and I, we have like a general fund account, which just our bill money goes into, and it kind of zeroes out at the end of the week or the end of the month whenever, our bills are done, because we know how much needs to be in there every week to pay those bills because we've done a budget.
Right.
But it kind of zeroes out for us. But for some people, it may be where it zeroes out, but some of it has been transferred to spending savings or other things. So there's multiple ways to do what we're doing. You're just giving us practical what's worked for you.
Yep.
And I think that's really healthy. So I love the idea of a monthly meeting and having it on paper. So you still get paper bills? Do you like paper bills?
I do like paper bills. I'm afraid that something's going to come in the email and I'm not going to see it.
I agree.
I like something just there. Also, there's some things that I need for tax purposes. And so if I'm going to have to go back out and print it later, I might as well just continue to have it mailed for me.
Paper bill gal.
Yeah.
I like that. So we're going to bring our kids into our discussion. We're going to have those monthly meetings, and we're going to begin somewhere. We're going to start somewhere this month.
Yeah.
Doing that. I think that's doable. So let's move into, now we're getting a plan for our personal finances. Now we're going to move into godly giving and godly finances. At Coastal, we make it really easy for people to be generous. We have this thing called the Dollar Club, and we talk about it every Sunday. And when we invented the Dollar Club, the idea behind the Dollar Club, and this, I'm just saying this for our podcast listeners that may not know, the Dollar Club was only ever intended to be kind of like a gateway, a starting point for generosity. We ask everybody that attends Coastal every Sunday to put $1 in the Dollar Club, because we kind of felt like, okay, well, everybody can do $1, right? You can start with a generous spirit and that developing that muscle of generosity through $1. And then we pool that money together, and then we give it away to local and foreign missions and all kinds of things around the world. We've done some amazing things through the Dollar Club. Even recently, like the Women's Care Medical Center, we gave $20,000 just through the Dollar Club to the Women's Care Medical. But I say all that, which the Dollar Club is a great thing, but it was only ever intended to be kind of like that, like I said, that gateway, that starting point to godly generosity, godly financing. Many people think that they can't afford to tithe, which a tithe is a 10% of whatever comes in. And many people think 10% is a chunk of change. I could never do that. But many times we say that because we give on the back end.
Right.
And not on the front end.
Yep.
Because we don't know what we have. And so it's like at at the end of the month, okay, what do I got here? Oh, I've got $25. I'll give that to the church. Or I've got $50 at the end of this week. I'll give that to the church. And what I hear you saying is that when we order our finances and when we prioritize what is important in our spending, in our saving, then we can prioritize our godly giving first, right?
Right, absolutely. And so if that means you need to automate your finances, do that.
Okay.
Set up that reoccurring, have it go out immediately. It also might be scaling back some of your wants and desires, that way you can build up to that 10%. Or maybe it's just moving a little bit more into your generosity, until you can pay off that debt and give fully the 10%. You know, a recent study that Pastor Chad had shared with me, they went and asked congregants, church attenders, what percentage of your income do you give? And most of them gave an amount that was over 11%. But then
They said that.
Oh, I give 11%, 14% of my income.
Okay.
So they were asked to give a percentage. But then in that same study, they asked, tell us the dollar amount that you give. And then they went and did the math for the person, and it actually worked out to be about 4%. And so what that tells us is, one, people don't budget, and two, they don't budget on percentages.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to get that part of it in order, in order for the tithing part and the generosity part to make sense for the average church member.
Yeah. So that budget is looking at what my income is. And some people ask me, well, do I tithe the 10% off the net or the gross? And we always just say, you know, that's between you and God. Pastor Chad and I, you know, we tithe before tax. So whatever it is, whatever it would be before taxes.
Right.
Because when we get our taxes back, you know, if we get any money back from the government, we don't want to have to tithe on that.
Sure. Well,
You know,
and I
so-
like
or
what
we don't tithe on that.
I like what Pastor Charlie says. Well, do you want to be netly blessed or grossly blessed?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But you know, when you tithe that way, so I think that conversation's between you and God.
Yes.
But just knowing, like you said, we don't know our percentages. What's our percent? What actually? You know, it would be probably shocking to me to know if people actually knew what they made. You know, because it's so automated now. We don't see that, you know, physical.
Right. They're not you're not logging into your
Every day.
into your bank every day.
Yeah, except you.
Except every day, every morning, sometimes a couple times a day.
But so I think knowing those percentages, knowing those numbers, being honest about that number, and then prioritizing giving to the Lord, back to the Lord first.
Right.
Like, what is first in my life is first in my checkbook. What is first in my life, what is, and we're going to talk about this, is first in my budget.
Yep.
So when I give on the first, when I give out of the first 10% is to the Lord.
Right. And so the Bible says where your treasure is, there is your heart. Is that right? Or
Yeah.
where your heart is, there's your treasure.
Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Right. And so you can look at somebody's bank statement and know
Where your heart is.
their heart is with God. Their heart is with the church. They gave the tithe back to me. Not to me.
To the
This
Lord.
is God. To him. Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. The church isn't wanting your money. You know, we're all driving around used cars.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
we're fine.
We're a nonprofit. You're not paying Pastor Chad.
Yeah. He
You
doesn't
know?
have a jet or
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
This is
and
not
so a
about
lot
that.
of people get hung up on giving to the church, that you're giving to our, you know, excessive lifestyles, but you're not. We're normal people that live in your neighborhood, you know, and
good.
and we also are doing ministry in your community. Coastal Church has such a rich, what's the word that I'm looking for?
Legacy of
In the community, you know, a reputation in the community for
Generosity.
for being generous, and that's only because people were generous to us first.
Yeah, that's good.
So so when you're tithing, you're giving God the 10% and you're learning to live off of the 90. But then you're also asking God to bless, protect, multiply that 90. And you'd be amazed. He'll do it, and you can do it.
Yeah. It's amazing when we follow God's principles. When you work God's way, it works.
Right.
And it doesn't make sense sometimes. Like when Chad and I were in transition from our position in Georgia to Arkansas, we had bought a house in Georgia, And then we had a investment property that we got into with some other pastors down in Gulf Shores. Like, we all invested in this condo. We were going to flip the condo, right? So we invested in there, and then we had rent. So God moved us, and then we had rent in Arkansas. And so we were holding the mortgage, investing in this property, and paying rent because our house didn't sell in Georgia because the market had crashed. So it was right around that mortgage market bust and all of that. So we're holding all of this. And every week when I would go to return to God our tithe, I would say, Lord, this makes no sense. Now, we weren't in debt, so we weren't like, it wasn't like pauper level, but I mean, we couldn't buy anything extra. We lived indoors, paid our bills, and that was about it, which is fine. No complaints, but on paper, it did not make sense.
Yes.
The budget didn't make sense. But I'm telling you, every single month, whether it was through just a lower utility bill, or something came through the mail that wasn't expected, or just crazy things, it always just worked.
Yes.
We always had enough. We always had more than enough, because I think that's how our God operates.
There's this trend going around about girl math.
Okay.
And really, God math is much better.
Yeah. That's good.
He protects, he multiplies.
That's so good.
And you cannot outgive him.
No.
Hands down, you cannot outgive him.
Nope. So tell us about your story when you began to tithe, because you didn't always do that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And we had come from another church. And so we had a little bit of church hurt. And so we weren't completely sold on giving to the church.
Yeah.
But I think it was one of the first rounds of test drive of the tithe that the church does. And so if your listeners don't know what that is, we do it occasionally, where a church member will sign up to test drive the tithe. And so for 90 days, you commit to tithing. We put your money aside. And if at the end of the 90 days, tithing doesn't work for you, you didn't see God come through, you're not more blessed because of it, we'll give you your money back.
Right.
Since I've been on staff, the church has never given somebody their money back.
Right. It always works.
Nobody has ever come and said, I don't want to be generous.
Yeah, tithing didn't work for me.
Tithing didn't work for me. So we signed up to test drive the tithe. Initially, it was just me.
Okay.
My husband just hadn't quite come around yet. He was attending church with me, but he just wasn't quite sold on the tithing idea. So we just started tithing off of my income. And within that first month, I got a bonus that was 10% of my annual income.
Wow.
And I think God just knew that we needed to know that we could never outgive him.
Yeah.
That there was never, ever, ever going to be any lack.
Yeah. And that was just confirmation to you. And then it was confirmation to Brett that I've got you.
Absolutely. And then next month, he's right on board.
Yeah.
And we have not looked back.
Right. So in your budget, the 10% is the first thing that comes out.
It's the first thing. It's
and
automated.
Then, so you budget on 90% of what comes in, basically.
Absolutely. And really, I mean, our savings category is pretty plentiful right now, because we don't necessarily subscribe to lifestyle creep either.
Yeah.
So
what's lifestyle creep?
So lifestyle creep, when you get a raise, don't look for ways to spend it. Look for ways to save it that you aren't already saving. Look for ways to give it. I don't need to adjust my lifestyle every time extra money comes in.
That's good.
And
that's hard.
I need to plan for future me.
Right.
So
future me will appreciate that.
Yes. Yeah.
That's so good. So we can only do godly finances God's way when we are intentional and we have a plan and we work that plan. And I like what you said. Don't think about giving it to a church. When we say the tithe, we are returning back to God what is already his.
Absolutely.
The Bible clearly teaches us that the first portion of our income belongs to God, is a tithe. And it is I trust you worship. The tithe is I trust you worship. When I give my tithe, what I'm saying to God is, God, I trust you more than the job that provides provides for me. I trust you more than the economy of our government, right? Which is volatile. I trust you more than that stock market. I trust you more than a magical check showing up in my, I trust you more than winning the lottery. I trust you more than all of these things, which I don't play the lottery, but if I did, I would. This is what it means. I trust you worship, right?
Yep.
And Chad has said this so many times, and I believe it so much. I believe that God would rather have I trust you worship than I feel you worship. Because we don't get goosebumps when we when we give back to God 10%. Like, to me,
Not
that
hardly, right? Yeah.
It doesn't give me goosebumps.
And sometimes it stings a little.
Yeah.
But eventually
it's obedience,
and eventually it'll turn to joy. And one day you're going to get that big bonus check from work, and you're going to give that first check that's larger than you ever could have imagined. And me as a business administrator, there's very few things that make me cry, just as like on a personal level. But people's generosity, it really does.
Yeah.
I'd love
you'll
to
email
hear,
us and tell us this. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'd love to hear generosity stories. I love people that are capable of giving tons, and they do. Because I can only imagine how hard it is to write that $10,000 check.
Wow.
But that I trust you worship, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And it moves the kingdom.
It does. It does. And even, that person that trusts God, with that $10 check, that $100 check, but that's their 10%. That's their income. That's
Absolutely.
based off that widow's mite, that I trust you worship. I don't, maybe a single mom or a single dad that don't have two incomes. Those are just as powerful as well.
Absolutely. The tithing stories that we get in every time that somebody does the test drive the tithe, or sometimes they'll write notes on their offering envelope and they'll write tag your it, because they've heard Pastor Chad, as he's dropping his giving envelope in, and he says, Lord, you did it again, and it's tag your it.
Yeah.
And they're just asking for God to meet them and finish the rest of the week strong.
Yeah. I love that. And, Pastor Chad reminded us this week that last in Sunday's sermon about generosity. The tithe is not necessarily generous, right? It's not necessarily generosity because it doesn't belong to us.
Right.
And really, Scripture teaches us when we spend the tithe, we are actually stealing from God. And so generosity begins when we give above and beyond that, that tithe. We give offerings to Dollar Club. We give offerings to special things at the church, like maybe the building program or, whatever, a missionary on our heart, or an organization, McDonald House outside of church or whatever. Those generosity things are godly generosity.
Yep.
The tithe really is a non-negotiable in God's word. And it's really a sticky subject that we don't like to talk about because Chad said this before too. Money is funny and we don't really like to talk about people's money. But you know what Jesus did.
And I think that we can talk about money without me saying, Jennifer, how much do you make?
Yeah.
Like that feels sticky to me. But I do think that having financial conversations can be healthy and helpful,
and freeing.
Absolutely. And so we're not having financial conversations with you because we want your money. We don't want something from you. We want something for you,
that's right.
And so that's why, the last 2 years, Coastal Church has paid for the financial peace package for our members.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to see them in financial freedom. It cost us thousands of dollars, and it wasn't because any one particular person paid for it. The multitudes paid for it.
Right.
It was because of all of our generosity that we were able to turn it back and give it to them.
That's good.
And give people resources.
Yeah, that's really good. So good, so refreshing. It's freeing. It's freeing to talk about that in a way that's life-giving, that's not, we've all made mistakes in our finances. We've all failed. We've all, but what I want people to hear today is there is hope, There's freedom. We can do it God's way. We can get on track. We can educate ourselves. We can be intentional. We can set time aside to do a budget. We can learn from people who have done it right, like you and others, and Dave Ramsey and things like that. I'm going to put all the information that Kerry shared with us today in our show notes. If you have questions and you happen to catch her, she's always at the outside venue.
Happy to talk. I am always happy to talk about personal finances.
Yeah, she's at the outside venue. She likes to sit outside, which we've talked about before. But yeah, her and Brett sit out there. And so, yeah, she is willing to talk to you if she can point you in the right direction.
Absolutely.
And help you get that ball rolling. Well, I always do a fun last question on our podcast every week. What is one thing that needs to be on our radar? Now, this can be something that's a favorite of yours. Maybe it's a favorite food, a favorite restaurant, a favorite book, a favorite podcast. What's something that needs to be on our radar that we need to do this week?
Well, I want people to keep the conversation going.
Okay.
I want people to continue learning. There's a podcast that I started listening to probably about 4 years ago.
Okay.
It's called How to Money.
How to Money.
It comes out 3 times a week. There's 2 incredible hosts, and they ask questions. They bring on experts, and you will be so much more knowledgeable for it.
Okay.
And you can go all the way back and learn some basic budgeting stuff. You can also learn about these high yield savings accounts or retirement strategies. So How to Money.
How to Money. Those will be that will be in the show notes as well. So education is important, and educating ourselves, and you've given us that tool, and I really appreciate that.
Keep it going.
We love a good podcast, you and I.
We do.
We share podcasts back and forth.
Absolutely.
Not just my murder mystery podcasts.
No, now we're sharing money podcasts.
Now we share money podcasts and intellectual podcasts because we're smart. Well, thank you so much for being on Coastal Conversations today. Next Wednesday, we're actually going to take this a little bit step further. This conversation, I'm going to have a lady on from our church that have just recently joined Coastal who, through coming back to the Lord and then beginning to tithe, God's done big things in their lives.
Wow.
And it's just an incredible story that I know everybody's going to want to hear. So this just kind of laid the foundation, and next week is going to be even more inspirational. So I'm excited about that. Thanks for being on here today, Kerry.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you for listening to this week's Coastal Conversations podcast. All of today's references will be found in the show notes. Also, if you enjoyed listening, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you at Coastal this Sunday as we pick the conversation up from here.